Thank you for getting back promptly after lunch. We really appreciate that. And I hope you enjoyed your lunch and got to see a little bit of our building here. So first, actually, I hope you've gotten a chance to see the vendors outside, some of the technology showcase that we have there. And we're going to do one more question, and this is related to, the possibility of going off-site. So we just want to, again, text is next year if we were to move to a different location in New Jersey, but not an AT&T campus, would you be more likely to attend in person, less likely, about the same, or you would plan to attend online or online anyway? So let's see, folks, and this would be a place that's convenient, probably northern New Jersey, convenient to New York, transportation, both road and public transportation. Las Vegas, yeah. Okay. Yep. Except you wouldn't be able to tell anybody about it because what goes on there stays there. So. All right. So that's about half would still be the same. More like okay. Very good. And then online. So. Okay. And again, you can keep voting because we'll continue. Take all of these results into account. Okay, and again, these are our sponsors, so we appreciate very much their support, and two of them, Cloudshield and Fortinet, will be speaking momentarily. And so, again, please get a chance at the break and afterwards even to talk to them. All right, our next speaker is Peder Jungck, and he's the Chief Technology Officer and Senior Vice President of Cyber and Information Solutions BU at SAIC, as well as the Chief Technology Officer and Director of Cloudshield Technologies, which is an SAIC company. So Peder is the founder and Chief Technology Officer of Cloudshield Technologies. He invented and serves as the architect of the Cloudshield's platforms, Packet C language, and its integrated software development environment that enables network security applications to be performed at multi-gigabit data rates. He has designed large-scale networks and security systems for defense customers, telecommunications providers, and Fortune 500 enterprises. For the past decade, his research and development has focused around high-speed, high-assurance, content-based networking and cybersecurity solutions related to DDoS and large network intrusion protection, leveraging flexible silicon solutions. In addition, he has pioneered new technologies for information assurance, information operations, and information exploitation using high-speed network devices that have led to funded research and mission-based deployments at commercial and government customers. Peder holds patents surrounding the Cloudshield solution architecture and internet-related protocol adaptation mechanisms focused on solving security threats. He received his BA in Math and Computer Science from Beloit College. Please join me in welcoming Peder Jungck.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's great to be here and glad to see everybody kind of this afternoon. As you can hear by a little bit of the background, I have kind of a fun job as I get to sit on kind of two sides of the fence. On one side, on the product side of Cloudshield, which we've done for kind of the last 11 years, we've gotten to partner with numerous different software application vendors, bringing in security solutions to tier 1 telcos around the world in a multi-tenant type environment and large network owners. As that large network owner point of view really kind of advanced into some of the large government networks, which are facing some of the largest of these advanced persistent threats. It's been a very interesting scenario to see kind of what they're really facing as you have large organizations who are really focused on highlighting them. And that's really what's helped to come over, and as we became part of SAC a year ago, I've gotten to be able to kind of see where we get to go with that. What's kind of been an interesting thing I'm seeing in these networks, though, is really a lot of some of the common types of changes that's changing over our networks. And I think that's really where, when I look at kind of the mobile and a lot of the wireline networks that we're doing, we're starting to talk more about things like service assurance. How do we really do a couple of things? One, make sure that our customers actually get the capabilities that they're expecting. The other piece is we're starting to look at things more from a business point of view. The internet was about, here's a device or a consumer or somebody else and an IP address, and it asked to go somewhere else, and we just kind of let the technology get it there. And it was about making sure that was efficient and it was high speed. But now we're trying to go and make different types of choices. This morning we heard about, there's a device. Well, maybe you want to have that sensor for some sort of provider be able to flow on a different route through the network. Not just what IP address it is and where should that go, but maybe we want to kind of segregate that so that we can minimize kind of our threats. If we have a different user, we may want to allow them conditional access based upon what they're going to do. These same exact things are happening in kind of our government networks as we talk about things like mission assurance, where we say it is important for us to go and determine what is the most critical assets, who are the most critical users in those priorities for us to have to make choices, because we will not be able to defend against everything at all periods of time. And so this is where it provides kind of an interesting backdrop is, as you think about our networks of today, we've had this massive explosion of kind of this user base. And it's provided a lot from kind of consumption. It's also really gone and created the digitization of our entire kind of economy. As you look at that, we've then introduced kind of this whole age of applications. 10 years ago, my phone was my phone. It was great that we all kind of had a cell phone, and then you could start to kind of text as your kind of application they were going to run on it. But now I sit there and I come home to my teenagers, and it's all comparing what are the 27 new apps you just added to your iPhone today. It is a very different realm. But yet at the same time, we start hearing about different types of threats and pieces where, gee, I downloaded that nice little password app, but guess what? That one was malicious, and it's now been pulled from the App Store. Well, guess what? There's a whole new realm of what we're kind of introducing into our lives as it becomes a very rapid pace, faster than we can kind of even think about these things. As you look at this too, the whole entire economy is kind of changing around this. In many ways, we all were about, let me get access, let me pay for that access. We then went through these eras within our networks of how much am I going to pay for certain types of data rate, let me prioritize our types of traffic. But now in many ways, we're moving more and more dollars to the content and into kind of the business capabilities that we're putting onto that network. And so what it's transforming is not only just the economics of how we run these networks, but also of the money flowing amongst many different constituencies that are operating within this realm. And all of these are providing as a backdrop a threat surface for our adversaries and for all these others to kind of play within, of which then just broadens kind of this entire reach. If you look at, kind of how the world was, 5-10 years ago, life was actually a lot kind of better. We had a very homogeneous world of these are the operating systems. I have devices that I can think about, even things like patch management, other types of pieces. We can almost get our hands around this. And we kind of had staff for different things. We had Windows staff, we had Linux staff, we had kind of people who knew these pieces. But as I go out and if I look at even with inside, my home, it's like, well, how many operating systems do we have? I went and tried to count it in between grabbing all my iPads and looking at the TiVos and figuring out the set-top box and all the rest. I got to about 24 before kind of the kids were done bringing me gadgets. And I'm going, all right, it's too many to even go and consider. How am I going to even figure out the version numbers of these? And how do I figure out which one's got a pedigree in some Linux stack that I've got to figure out versus which one's something different? And I'm going, gee, I don't even know if my set-top box even does a patch update ever. It's like, how would I even know as a consumer somewhere on my messaging interface of, all right, there's a channel lineup change, but what went and said your security posture's changed? Well, it's like even your ability to kind of interact with even the notion of this environment is dramatically changing. Whereas we all happily see on kind of our homogeneous world kind of these updates. But guess what? I got 12 new updates for you and we're going to do it. Or guess what? If I'm at work, we already applied them for you because you're not allowed to log on without them. This is a very different world. It's at least in your face and it's at least prevalent as we go and try and make ourselves think about it. But as you look at this, we're also expanding into a whole new world of uses. At least at the home, we kind of think about that, what are those pieces? We might go and say that they're not necessarily always critical to what we do. But you know what? I think in a lot of these other areas, they are starting to get critical. And we're going and adding in all these technologies. You have companies like Ford that are creating great sales benefits because of kind of the modern system that they'll go put in for mobility with inside that car. And at the same time, you have people going and saying, gee, that hooks into all kinds of things on that car's network. We're talking about cars that will back off on the distance based upon, their cruise control of how close something's in front or hit your brakes. Well, I wouldn't want somebody else deciding that now is the time to go do that. And so when we think about this, it's providing incredible benefits and safety and cost and others, but at the same time, it's creating a whole new breadth of pieces. And then often, many cases, when you go and talk about, well, gee, what's on the internet? Like this morning, we talked about the devices. You have this entire world of sensors that are getting introduced into this side. And those sensors have dramatic sets of technology. I recently went and had an operation take out my gallbladder. One of the coolest things in my hospital prep for all that was they come in and they say, I'm going to do an ultrasound. And then once we get the results, then we'll go and tell you what we're going to do. Well, I hadn't gotten to the car about 10 minutes later before all of a sudden I was getting my doctor calling saying, I have the results. And I'm going, I just walked out the door. I know it was a long walk out of the hospital. How'd you have that? Oh, don't worry, it's digital. Somebody went and looked at it, and there's some service center, and they just kind of go through and they said, here's the results. Well, I'm like, what if it's wrong? Somebody looked at a video file, and somebody said, all right, you got stones. I'm going, that's great. Well, what if they said it was good? And, or what if they said it's bad? I'm going, all right, I'm glad that this is quick service, and, the 3 minutes or less as I look at my phone, that was pretty nice, but I'm like, gee, all of a sudden, this is kind of a different thing that it used to be. My doctor kind of looked at that, and the x-ray was a physical thing that somebody would have to interdict along grabbing this piece. This is a changing type of world that what's happening is happening at a pace which we can't kind of turn back and we can't change. Now, if you think about, what that's doing, if you just stop for a moment on the security side and think about even just the management side, we have all kinds of new struggles that are also in this network. It's really easy when we talk from a security of saying, all right, I'm going to take each topic discretely. Let's talk about this attack. Let's talk about these. But as we go and we look in networks and try and find these, this is all jammed in through massive traffic growth. We have the type of thing where you go watch, it was like P2P a few years ago. Well, guess what? That's now a small percentage because you have huge amounts of video coming down. You have over-the-top pieces. Well, okay, so now not only do I need to go and look at and see this and kind of get myself to wade through all of that to kind of find the things that I'm worried about from just the script kiddies and all those, but I've got to get all the way in and find kind of the real things. And then how do I go and tell even just between these others? Here's the botnet forming on a whole bunch of consumers and generating spam and coming out of there versus just somebody downloading massive amounts of content for either from themselves that they could never physically watch or to relay. I'm like, these are all just the things that are just the noise. These aren't even the things that I have to cope with, but yet these are severe network management issues and other things that we've got to build into this infrastructure. And then when you look at this, we've got a whole broad set of, what are the policies and how are we dealing with them? I think there was mention this morning of, we want to get off, different types of child pornography and other types of things off of these sites. And yet, countries will go pass laws, but yet, how do I even know if you're in this country or not as I do different types of aspects of where you're routing? How do I go in and make sure I have fair use and policies and agreements with my customers to go deal with them? We're changing from this is a best effort IP network, this is about access, this is about getting on, to really we're expecting a role change. We're expecting things to start happening and people to play. We're making kind of decisions on what's good, kind of what's bad. But if you look at this from kind of that cyber challenge, from the security, now all of a sudden you have this massive user base out there. This user base is coming, but yet not only is it there, but it's dynamic. Somebody can go buy a device and then instantly start to connect. They're going to be appearing on there. We talked about some of the things of how do you get identity in here? Well, how do you even know, what this person is? Did they just hop off of an airplane and connect in? Well, if they connect in with my SIM card, I've got a little bit of view to that roaming. But if they come in and they're at my little Starbucks hotspot or some other type of piece, I've added layers of indirection onto that you don't know kind of what they've brought, where they've come, how it's going to be there. And so as you kind of get into this, one is this identity, but the other thing is what's their intent? What is the intention of these types of users that are coming? We all have this notion of we want to have all this access, and that's what we're going to continue to do because that's what's providing the business benefit. But each of these are posing kind of different aspects of kind of these rules. As you think about the applications that are coming on, all these applications, as they sit out there, it's too large to ensure kind of trustworthiness. We talk about, should somebody go validate what app should be on an app store? At the same time, we see malicious apps and we go, well, somebody better rip down all the bad ones. But when you look at just the vast quantity, they're coming in at such a rate that how are you going to vet how that exists? What if that app doesn't do something for 4 months? What if that app just sits there? Or what if it's the 7th update to that app that actually introduces something that's there? These are types of issues that we're just starting to grapple with. And in every type of case, we've seen examples of them. Part of the problem, though, is, it's not just that it's an app, but they're moving money. They're moving lots of amounts of money, and that is what has really brought people into this whole type of environment. Recently we released at SAC a report in partnership with McAfee on the underground economy, and part of what it talked about is just how much this money flow has become this attractive factor. Well, we've gone from a network that was moving traffic to content and applications and processing really financial transactions, that it has made these large-scale environments kind of really that threat surface that is of most interest, not only from kind of nation states on a government type of thing, but to really the organized crime and the rest of these environments. Part of what makes everything so great is having access to all this types of capability. But yet, at the same time, we have an economy and an environment that is dramatically transformed without businesses changing. If you think about the businesses you work in today, how fundamentally has it changed what it does over the last 20 years? Well, in the same period of time, since 1975, we've gone from 17% of the value of companies was in intellectual property to over 80% today. All of a sudden, this is a flip. Well, if all of a sudden it's not just, we have a few trade secrets and processes, but mostly we have physical things and property and other elements, all of a sudden now this is in things that are intangibles in many cases is intellectual property. That has a fundamental flip in what is most important. If all of a sudden your IP is far more valuable than any piece of physical infrastructure that you have by that definition, how should we kind of think about this? And at the same time, we're going to be in a mass rush to going and putting it out into the world, enabling devices, moving it to the cloud and the rest. And if you look at this, as we've gone from kind of this relatively few types of vendors and a very homogeneous type of world that was just a huge industry in and of itself, and we just were barely getting to the point of feeling like we could grapple with it, we now introduce, things like the home. Here, the introduction of an application is an emotional event. I'm at this store and it's the coolest thing ever, I gotta have it. There isn't the, I wonder what operating system under here. I wonder what the security procedures are of this new device that I'm gonna go connect in. And you know what, it's never gonna change. That piece is not going to change. We're not going to go and all of a sudden say, stop, educate everybody, and now we need to go have this new qualification. That emotional event's still going to do it. But I think what's interesting about this is we're starting to take these different types of dynamics that become the norms. It's going to start to change a little bit about how we even think about addressing them. And so this is where when I kind of look at these environments, whether it's in kind of the large businesses and where you do have some of that oversight, and you get down into kind of the homes and the rest of these, there's kind of a choice on where can you go to manage. And one of the things we had, at least when computing was in the business side, is the business kind of took the controls, they took that responsibility. But now as all of a sudden your business infrastructure is distributed from sensor grids to clouds and the rest, to where consumers and pieces are having networks that are bigger and more vast than kind of your companies in many cases, just even as you go to the homes and the mobile and the technologies that they're using, different players start to come in. There was a couple of years ago an interesting set of things that happened in Brazil. You actually had a bank that was targeted by an attack. The interesting thing about it was nothing was compromised on the security of the bank, and all their websites and all that banking pieces were perfectly healthy. There was nothing compromised on any of the consumers. Because what did? They hijacked the DNS infrastructure. And simply everybody who went to something that wasn't quite that bank. Well, the interesting piece you start seeing is all of a sudden there's this notion, after a decade of kind of dealing with the websites, and we locked them down and building the firewall market, to a decade of kind of antivirus and host-based type things, all of which is a good, valid foundation. We've now moved to this world of the middle. There's infrastructure and pieces that exist throughout there, and there's going to have to be kind of a role for those in there. And for many like consumers, that is the only hope, because it's not going to be sitting there on all their end. And as you have 1,000 apps, that's trying to get 1,000 different vendors to go and try and establish the same type of policy. And so I think this is the interesting paradigm shift. So if you think of this landscape change, we have not only all this kind of traditional IT of where we thought the outsider was outside, inside was inside. I had some point where, worst case, I go to my backup tapes. But we've now moved to this world to where the insider is probably somebody you gave a badge to, you give access control, that persistent threat is already on your machines, and you don't know where in your backup tape, and there's so many different discrete systems. There was never a point in time to where you just go back to. It is kind of one of these that is fully distributed. And so this is where I go look at this type of world. But the neat thing about it is really thinking how we can actually make things a lot more better, not only from how we accomplish our business, but also how we achieve kind of trust and effectiveness. So one of the things we're doing at SAIC in our business is really moving everything to the cloud. We continue to move our customers to the cloud. We continue to secure the clouds. But even in our own business, we have a large percentage, thousands of workers, who often sit on customer sites as part of their service opportunity, but yet they need to get to corporate assets. We spend a lot of money on taking laptops and other pieces, give them all, only to sit at their home because they're not bringing them into their customer site, just so they can go have that. It's like, hey, we'd love to use the new technology. Bring your own device is kind of the wave of our future. Is, you want to have your iPad too and just connect up to it? That's great. Let me build a virtual desktop infrastructure inside my enterprise cloud, let you do there. But you know what? I still do worry about, well, how do I validate that user? How do I get in? From our security hat, we know that, it's not just the data that I get them authenticating with on the wire, but I'd really like to know that their offline data says, no, this is actually a registered user, that, hey, they're on the AT&T network, and you know what? They're one who signed up and already validated with their SAIC account relationship to there, and I'd like only those devices to actually go and access my enterprise, and so that I can say that. And you know what? I don't want a device that was just activated in the last 3 weeks to instantly have access to all my infrastructure until I've validated that, until I've had the employee come check out other types of things. I'd like to provide this control. But you know what? The neat thing is we can actually start to do this, but it is a broader set of collaboration kind of throughout. And so then you can start to say, here's what I'm going to do in the cloud. And I can start to pick and choose. There's some apps that I want to run in those public clouds because you know what? The risk profile is a little bit different than my most sensitive kind of HR data, those types of things. Maybe that's going to sit inside. But you know what? I know I may have an HR worker that's remote, but give me that trustworthiness all the way from the device to the rest. But what this means is it's much more of a move to trusting a provider, to having a large network infrastructure that has the controls, the mechanisms to be able to adapt to the change. I think one of the most interesting pieces is we've moved out of this world of security, of racking and stacking devices, to one of really, I can't predict what I'm going to need to do on these networks tomorrow. And I think that's really been the focus of us. From my Cloudshield hat, that's been what we do is let's go build you trustworthy systems, and I don't know the mission of tomorrow. But what I do know is it's not about an infrastructure change. It's a dynamic event. Just like I can download a new app on my phone, I can connect my infrastructure, I can provision 1,000 servers inside my cloud. I think this is where it's going to be. But if you look at this whole landscape is a very different kind of surface for all of us. So I've left some links and some pieces. Part of the thing about identity is none of us know which one to put up. And so we put up all of our different types of pieces. But I'd love to have a continuing dialogue with you over time. And thank you very much.